many whoa. Turn up now, I'm about to blow. Up and y'all don't even know. Powder keg about to explode. Independent, I run this show. International, run the globe. Hyperdrive, no cruise control. Got the life and they losing foe. I stay 100, I keep it homegrown. I live for the applause, and all the people know. I bring the swag like nobody can. Don't mean to brag, what about it, yeah. I bring the swag like nobody can. It's in the bag, man, I got it, yeah. Built it from the bottom, ayy. About to be up in your face. Putting proof is in the chase. Put in work, the paper pays. On the up and I'm on the road. You beneath and you cutting cold. Hyperdriving, no cruise control. Got the life and they losing foes. I stay 100, I keep it homegrown. I live for the applause, and all the people know. I bring the swag like nobody can. Don't mean to brag, what about it, yeah. I bring the swag like nobody can. It's in the bag, man, I got it, yeah. I bring the swag like nobody can. Don't mean to brag, what about it, yeah. I bring the swag like nobody can. It's in the
Welcome back to A Second Chance. My name is Philip Jones, your host, or half of your host for this evening, kidney transplant recipient.
And I'm Tafaro Cook, two-time kidney transplant recipient and founder of Kidney Care Coaches, where we coach people with stage 3 to stage 5 kidney disease. If you or you know someone who has kidney disease challenges and needs to be coached on their situation, hit us up at kidneycarecoaches.com.
So today we have a double lung transplant recipient. Jenny, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
We appreciate you joining us. Mr. Cook, you go ahead with the first question.
Wow, Jenny, I'm just listening to your story and I don't even know where to start, but that's pretty amazing. You know, I kind of wanted to start. When was you diagnosed with cystic fibrosis? How old was
I
you?
was diagnosed at 6 months old. So I was a little
Okay.
tiny baby. Yeah.
Well,
That was
that's pretty. I'm sorry. Go
so,
ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say that was the official diagnosis. They pretty much knew on day 3. So
Did you have any symptoms around that time? Because you got your transplant a while from that, and usually when I mean, I work with pediatrics for the last 15 years, and usually when it's diagnosed so early, that we see complications so earlier also. So tell me a
yeah.
little bit about that. How do you maintain?
Well, so when I was diagnosed as a baby, I got very lucky with a mother who was determined to make sure that she could do everything possible that she could. She became a respiratory therapist. And
Oh, okay.
so partly that, she always knew what symptoms to look for and, get on top of it right away. And also, I would say when I was younger in my childhood, my CF was very mild. I didn't have a whole lot of problems. I would go through times where I was sick but most of my cystic fibrosis was my digestive system when I was younger. So
Okay.
I suffered a lot of digestive problems more than my lungs. And my lungs didn't really start, turning until I was in my mid 20s. And then by
Mhm.
the time I was 39, it was time for a transplant.
I'm gonna keep it real with you. That's really phenomenal to see it that long. You know what I mean? Just to keep the lungs going that strong and
Yeah.
hats off to your mom for taking that on like a warrior she is. She's like, this is not gonna happen. So we're gonna do everything.
Yeah.
As far as your pediatric life, was it any different than any other kid? Was there certain things you had to watch and be careful with?
I would say no. I mean, I
Okay.
had the most normal childhood, and my mom, she didn't treat me like I was sick. She made me go outside and play with the kids and keep me active. And so
I
I
love it.
never really felt like a lot of pediatric children do, where they have this horrible disease that they have to fight.
Right.
So I didn't start feeling that until my 20s. So, I mean, of course, there were times, I spent a lot of time in the hospital, but it never really affected me like it does some other children.
Mm. Were you able to play any sports? I know you said you outside, you did all the outside activities, but like high school, did you play any sports or was you active in high school?
I could have, but I didn't. I
Okay.
didn't want to. I wasn't interested in sports,
Okay.
but I probably could have.
Okay. Now I'm gonna tell you right now, Phil knows that I will pepper you with questions forever. So
Oh
Phil,
yeah.
Yeah, I love questions.
go ahead, Phil.
So it it says basically when I was reading your bio, um, that like you said, relatively growing up, you had normal childhood. What what did you notice as time went on? Uh, the progression of symptoms that you developed from cystic fibrosis up until the time where you need to get put on the transplant list.
Okay, so when I was a kid, so cystic fibrosis, we have lung exacerbations where we get lung infections. You got to go on IV antibiotics. When I was a kid, I would have these lung exacerbations, but I never really felt bad. My mom would say, "You're sick. You need antibiotics." So I'd go get the antibiotics. When I was in my 20s, that's when I really started to feel sick whenever I was sick.
Mhm.
So I would start feeling fatigue, and I could feel all this mucus in my lungs building up and coming out more. And so I would say mid 20s is, I remember the first time that I really felt sick from it. I was in my apartment and I had a fever and I just felt really bad. And I called my mom. I was like, I'm not feeling well. And she's like, well, you need to go to the ER. And I did. And it was just the same old exacerbation that I had always had. And then from then on, I could feel myself starting to get sick because I could feel the mucus build up and the fatigue. And so, um, I guess that's how I started to notice the progression, and then as I got older, it would start happening more and more often, to the point where I was,
Oh,
in the hospital for a week every 2 weeks. So I was in the hospital
Mm.
constantly. Yeah.
I mean, and you said this started in your early 20s, correct?
Yeah,
And still to wait till you said you were 39 when you got the
39.
transplant?
Yeah,
Wow. So from 20 to 39 sick like for 20 years literally?
yeah. I mean, it
Wow.
started off slower.
Mhm.
I would get sick every 6 months, I would go in the hospital, and then eventually it was every 3 months, and then
Right.
like I said there at the end, it was constantly in the hospital. And it was like when I was probably, let's see, I don't remember how old I was, but it was 2014. So it was 4 years before my transplant. I was diagnosed with lupus. And so I had all
Mm.
these lupus symptoms that were affecting the CF2. So I think that maybe the lupus played a part in the decline of my lung function. And so after that, I needed oxygen full time, and the oxygen requirement, it started only at night, then constantly, and the liters kept going up and up that I needed. So it seems like from 2014 to 2018, things progressed fast. Like it was only
Mm.
4 years where I was like not on oxygen to full, oxygen where I needed it full time.
Were you working full time or what was your social life and work life like at the time?
When I was sick or
Yeah.
before?
I mean, like when you were sick, when you started having to be on oxygen at that time.
I wasn't employed full time. I did
Okay.
have a nonprofit organization that I ran that it was seasonal. So during the busy times, it was a full time job, and I
Mhm.
would run myself down doing it. Social life was, I tried to stay social. Like I was just out doing. I was just trying to live my life, oxygen or not, tow it along. I didn't let that affect me. I just tried to do as much as I could when I could. And of
Right.
course, there were times I had to stay home because I didn't feel good. But um, I, as far as that goes, I didn't let it bring me down. I wouldn't.
That's what I'm talking about, Phil. When you see these warriors, sometimes I hear, people hear my story and they're like, "Wow," but I hear everybody else's story and I get like, "Wow," because everyone is different. You know, I tell Phil all the time, you can take 20 people who have some type of transplant, and all their stories are so unique and different how they, you know, arrived to transplant. And I think that's phenomenal. So, you know, and I'm gonna tell you, running a nonprofit is lots of work. Okay.
Yeah,
Phil,
I know.
you know, sometimes we don't even know where our next money is going to come from and things like that. So, you
Right.
know, it's a lot to do, and it can be stressful at times. But let
Yes.
me ask you a question: when you had lupus, did you have any kidney challenges at the time with lupus?
No, I was also
Okay,
my lupus was also really mild.
great.
It just affected I just got, like, joint pain,
Hmm.
and it would cause a lot of fevers, and I think it affected my lungs. The doctors say that I didn't have a whole lot of problems with the lungs and lupus, but that's, they don't know. So, I think it did.
And starting like even early, you know, when you were diagnosed and you're as a pediatric and on up, was your nutrition any different than anybody else's? Did your mom make you eat certain foods and stuff? Can you talk about that? Elaborate on that?
Yeah. So, cystic fibrosis, I'm going to tell you the basic CF patient and then me. So, um, CF people need more calories, more fat in their diet
Right.
to try to maintain their weight.
Hmm.
I was very fortunate and I didn't have those issues. So I still ate a lot of food like a normal CF um, patient needs to maintain their weight, but I never had the weight problem. In fact, I think I
Okay.
was on a diet my whole, you know, young adulthood life. I was always trying to lose weight, which wasn't great, but I didn't have the nutrition issues that a lot of CF people do. But some like if you see a CF person, they are typically shorter and skinny because they're
Yep.
trying to put on weight. A lot of them need feeding tubes to help with the nutrition, but I didn't. I did have a healthy, very healthy appetite. My mom would always say she would have to work so she could feed me. But it wasn't because I needed to put on weight. It was just because that's how it is for some CF.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got you. Let me ask you this now, and I can contest to this. When I was playing college football when I literally on the football field got sick and had to have a kidney transplant, my first one. How did you have any rebellion time in your life from teenager? You know, in that time, can you talk about that? Because we might have some pediatrics listening to this. So,
Yeah, I did. I think every teenager goes through it.
yeah,
Didn't want to take my medicine, didn't want to do my treatments, and I went through that just like almost everybody.
right,
Um, but that was a little bit difficult with my mother, being my mother. She was always on me to get those treatments done, and so I had them, and I had them a lot after I moved out. When I was 18. But luckily for me, I was healthy enough to go through that smoothly. Now, some CF, you know, warriors don't have that. They don't have
right.
that luxury. So once they start rebelling, then their lungs are going to decline because they're not doing what they need to do in the correct way. So for me, I was just lucky because um, I was healthy. I was a really healthy CF person. So that's why it lasted so long before I needed the transplant.
Right, and that could be a challenge in itself because you're like, you know, mom, I'm healthy. I feel good. You know, I should be able to run around with my friends and this and that. But your
Yeah.
mom was so dedicated and disciplined. She knew, and that could be a tug of war also in
Yeah.
itself. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I think with my mom being a respiratory therapist, she, she saw it. She saw, CF patients working. She saw
Right.
them declining as teenagers. And so she would come home and talk about those things with me.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of parents out there that they don't know what to expect with CF. They have no idea. Their child has CF. They're not going to realize what kind of decline they're going to have. If they're healthy through their adolescence and, into teenager, they don't it's hard because they don't know what they're not, they don't know what to expect. And it's a little bit better now because there's so much social media, and everybody can connect with people and find
Mhm.
other, parents who are going through it. And but when I was younger, there was no social media. I was the only CF
Right.
person that I knew, except for
Hmm.
one gentleman when I was 16. But and that's another thing that kind of helped me a little bit. That I'll backtrack a little bit. There was this when I was 16. There was a boy that I dated, I guess, and he was a lot sicker than me, a lot
Hmm.
sicker. And I saw the things that he was going through, and he actually ended up passing away when we were teenagers. So I saw that. So that always stuck in my head that I could get there someday. And so I think that maybe now social media helps a little bit with CF patients and parents, because they have a support system, they have support groups online, and but back in the day they didn't have that, so it was difficult.
Right. I can contest to back in the day. I was playing college football in the '80s, late '80s when I got sick, and at 18 years old, I knew no one who had a kidney problem at all, and even the doctors at the time were like, you're a healthy young gentleman and everything, and the only people I seen that were had kidney challenges were 60 and up, at
Yeah.
that time. So
Hmm.
so I clearly understand where you're going. It wasn't anything remotely out there for anybody with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I get what you're saying, man. That's why your other work with your foundation is pretty awesome. But I'm not gonna get into that yet. I'm gonna let Phil take some more questions because, like I said, I can pepper you all day.
When this could get on the roll, it's a roll for sure. Um, so I want to know what brought on the move um to, I believe you said El Paso, right?
Yeah.
What made that? What was the thought process in your parents? Well, I guess at that time you're an adult for you to move to El Paso for your transplant.
Well, actually, no, I moved from Albuquerque to Houston for my
Oh,
transplant.
Houston. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And so the reason why I moved to Houston is because Albuquerque didn't have any transplant center at all. And
Right.
at the time, Houston, my insurance was allowing me to go to Houston. So we went to Houston for the evaluation, and in that evaluation, they didn't tell me that we had to move there, but they strongly suggested it. They said it would be easier for us. And
Hmm.
so um, it was a little while before I even got on the transplant list. So we ended up moving to Houston for that purpose, to be closer to the transplant center. And so I just moved to El Paso a couple of months ago, and that's just to be closer to family. So we didn't move back to Albuquerque, but we moved to El Paso, which is about 4 hours from Albuquerque, and my mother and my grandmother live about in between there, about 2 hours. So that's why we're in El Paso now.
Okay. Okay. Y'all gonna hear some incredible, but Jenny, you only spent 5 days on the transplant.
Yeah.
I've been on the transplant for 12 years. Mr. Cook did 10. So when we hear 5 days, it's like we start thinking to ourselves, like, is that possible? Like, I
Oh
mean,
yeah. I mean,
how? So I'm looking for. How shocking and surprising was it when you got that call only 5 days after being on the list?
I was shocked. So what happened was is I was starting to get sick. I was starting to get an exacerbation. So when I
Mm,
was doing one of my checkup pre-transplant appointments, they did this walking test. And when I did the walking test, they make you walk for 6 minutes, and
right.
you have to wear the oxygen. Well, they had to hike that up to 11 liters just to get through that test.
Wow.
And so I go to the appointment, and they said, um, we're going to put you on the transplant list. And I said, okay. And so when they did that, I expected that it was going to take a while, because I just knew that I was getting sick again. So I figured, you know, they're taking that into account. And my husband and I had asked my coordinator, I was like, how long do you think it's going to take? And of course, he can't give me an answer. And here he was like, well, maybe like within a month or so. And when I heard a month or so, I was shocked at that because, like, I wasn't close to being ready. Like I hear about a lot of people who are in the hospital waiting for their transplant because they're too sick to be home. And I'm still out, you know, doing pulmonary rehab and doing all these things, you know, just trying to live my life. Of course, I was, you know, on a lot of oxygen. But so when I went home, and it was in 5 days, and they called, and I was like, What? What do you mean there's lungs for me?" And I couldn't believe that it happened that fast. Like, I was not ready at all. Like, I was thinking I still have at least a month to get ready, and I didn't. And it was just like I wasn't prepared. I wasn't ready. And I'm trying to run around that morning. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning and get ready. And I don't really like to admit this, but when I was on my way to the hospital, I was hoping that it was going to be a dry run just because I didn't think I was ready. I didn't think I could do it then. And thankfully, it wasn't a dry run, and I got amazing lungs. And but like I didn't feel like I was sick enough to get the transplant, but I guess I now going looking back, I was definitely sick enough. But at the time, I felt like there's no way. Like these should be going to somebody sicker. But
I clearly understand where you're coming from with that because I think, you don't know until you know. And so that's one of those situations right there. You're like, I'm not even ready. And then all of a sudden you're getting worked up for transplant. And then you're like, okay, I was ready. So
yeah,
it's kind of like weird. And I think what happens is we try to get ready in our mind. You're trying to like anticipate what's going to happen. And when you're in this situation, when you're about to get a transplant, you have to release control, especially if you're someone who wants to have control of what's going on and things. You just have to
yeah,
give it up and just stand on your faith, because then once you get in the
hmm,
gurney, once they suit you up and everything, you're out of control. You have nothing. You're
yeah,
just, that person going with the flow, because and that's what, to me, can be the challenge of giving up the control, because I'm not ready to give up the control, so.
yeah.
But but
And it's scary because
it is.
I was scared. I wasn't sure I was going to make it off that table, and I was
Right.
terrified. And I mean, you like you said, you can't do anything. You got to go and give them that control, and hopefully, pray that
Yeah.
everything comes out okay. And so it's a scary thing.
It is a very scary thing, because now we hear, sometimes they go smooth, people are home in 5 days and everything is good. But we
Mhm.
also hear about, stories where people had to stay in hospital for 2 or 3 months because of
Yeah.
rejection and everything. So let's talk about, and I want you to elaborate, right after the transplant, you wake up, and talk about that journey right there.
Okay. Well, so one of the things I was most afraid of is waking up with the ventilator tube because in past experiences, I haven't done well with things and going down. And so I was terrified of that. And I remember I really wanted my husband to be with me when I woke up. I was just praying for that. And luckily, I woke up and he had about 10 minutes left of his time that he was allowed in there. So he was in there with me, which was amazing. And um, it seemed like it took forever, but I guess looking back, it didn't. I had this this breathing tube in, and they're getting ready to take it out, and like I'm terrified of that. You see it in the movies and stuff, and so she goes to pull it out, and it gets stuck in there. The tube
Mm.
is stuck, and I'm, she keeps trying it, and it's like she keeps yanking on it. I'm like, just stop doing that because it didn't feel good. And I was just so scared that we were going to have to go back into surgery and remove it. But I don't know. I guess the pulmonologist came in and just yanked it out, and it just came out. And so it wasn't that bad, actually. Um, but I was in there and my back was hurting so bad that I kept complaining about it. And they're like, well, do you want to get in the chair? And I said, yes, please get me out of the bed. So I got out of the bed. This was in like an hour after I woke up. I was already up and in the chair. And this is in
Mm,
a high level ICU right whenever you wake
right,
up. It's not
right.
even like the main ICU. And so the surgeon comes by and the other surgeon who went and got the organs walks by and they're like all just amazed that I'm sitting in the chair. Like they come in, people keep coming in, they're like, oh my gosh, you're already in the chair. And so I was like, well, my back is killing me. I have no choice. But so it was like shortly after that, they moved me to the regular ICU and my recovery went amazing. Things were just happening. I didn't have a whole lot of pain. Of course, I was doped up on pain medicine. A lot of people talk about hallucinations, and I didn't have any of those, which I was actually a little bit disappointed. I wanted to have some of those just to see what it was like. I was hoping for something good to hallucinate, not like the horrible stuff, but it didn't
Right,
happen.
right.
And so, yeah, so it was just, I was in the hospital for, I think it was 11 days. And the longest the wait was because I had these 4 chest tubes, and that last chest tube just wouldn't finish draining, and it took forever for them to get it out. And so as soon as that last one came out, they sent me on my way, and so it was great. Like I didn't have any complications. I got up and I was walking the next day, and it's funny how when you're in the hospital and you feel so strong, and then you go into surgery for one day and you wake up and you're so weak. Like I
Right.
remember going for the first walk and my legs were so weak and I couldn't. I was like, why are my legs this weak? I haven't been in bed that long, but it really just takes a lot out of you. And
Yeah.
I just remember each walk I got a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger. So it was an amazing thing that I didn't have any complications or anything. Like my story is a little bit, I would say a little bit shorter than some just because it went so well. I'm not complaining, but
That's a beautiful thing.
yeah, it really is. I was very, very blessed. I was very lucky that I didn't have any complications during that time. So it was great. Yeah.
So let's take a quick step back. You mentioned pulmonary rehab. Now, I'm just now learning about pulmonary rehab. We had our conference last Friday. I had a lung doctor on, and he was explaining the whole process. And I'm sorry, she was explaining the whole process. And how was that? How was that process for you with pulmonary rehab?
So I hate to talk bad about it because everybody thinks it's great. I hated it. I hated pulmonary rehab. And that's just because I felt like they weren't pushing me hard enough.
Mm.
Pulmonary rehab for me, I've always liked to really exercise and lift weights and of course I couldn't do that very much when I was sick. But when they sent me to pulmonary rehab, I felt like all they would do is put me on a treadmill or a bike or some cardio thing and check my sat over and over again and you know exercising. I hate cardio. Like, I hate doing cardio. Like, give me some weights. And so for me, it wasn't fun, but it was, I guess it was helpful before. I wasn't on it very long because they started me on it about a month and a half before they put me on the list. So I didn't get a whole lot of pulmonary rehab beforehand because I got called. I still had like 2 or 3 more months to go on that before or after I got called. But for me, pulmonary rehab, I just didn't like it. I didn't feel like they were pushing me hard enough. But I've heard a lot of people go through pulmonary rehab, and it really does help them a lot, especially when they're really sick. They learn how to breathe better, and it builds their endurance. And it probably would have helped me too. I'm just stubborn and I hate cardio. So, yeah.
Okay, well, we're gonna take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Okie doke.
the people, defying the odds, cause it ain't even. Fighting for freedom, given by God, we say we equal. Fly like an eagle, this for the heroes, up in the helos, and down in the valley, fighting the battles, fearing no evil. This is for infantry, out with a squad. Troopers and towers for hours they watch, driving in convoys that stumble for bombs. All they protect are their fathers and moms. When do they call? This is for liberty, justice for all. We are the people, together we strong, and I will catch you when you fall.
We all will fall and hide away. We can't get to our feet. We all been grinding every day to find opportunity. We all get lost along the way, not knowing who to be. We are the people. We are the people.
Calling us fascists. What have we done in order to afford these anger reactions? Patience that come in our colors is gorgeous. Sick of the madness. The devil he plucking our youth like a florist. Gotta combat this. Evil is currently making its orbit. Never been a black and white war. Truth is what we have to fight for. What you think I grabbed the mic for? What you think I grabbed the mic for? Time to say what we needed said. God our Father, he should be the head. Lead the people while the demons fled. Underneath we all bleeding red.
We all will fall.
Hey, what is going on, world? Edward, Mr. Why Not Drake is here. Hope you all are having a fabulous day. I just got on here real quick just to ask you all to please consider supporting the Why Not Foundation annual Why Not Impact Lives holiday drive, where we go across the country delivering gift bags to pediatric transplant patients and families at various treatment facilities and hospitals. And this year, we'll be adding a little extra seasoning by treating families to dinner. We'll be giving them gift cards so they can go out and buy turkey, some ham, chicken, whatever they're into, and just bring their families together. Because, you know, we're all about connecting and bringing families together and brightening the lives of people. So I ask you all to please consider supporting us by visiting www.whynot.org, spelled YNOTT.org, to make a donation to our holiday drive session. And also, I ask you all to follow us on all social media platforms at Why Not Connect, spelled YNOTTCONNECT. And just like my hat say, just believe, and I'm trusting and believing that you all will support our efforts this year and help us impact and brighten the lives of many people. Why not have a great day, and God bless. Take care.
Awesome. Welcome back to A Second Chance, Mr. Cook. Go ahead, sir.
So Jenny, that's funny that you say you don't like cardio. I have to second that. I own my own fitness studio when I was on dialysis, and I created programs for patients in the dialysis center, and I never liked cardio anyway. And I lift weights now, and I'm like, I'll do some HIIT or something like that, but I usually don't like stationary, steady cardio. That's just not my thing. I like lifting weights, so I have to agree with you there.
Yes, 100%. I don't know. I don't have enough endurance, I guess, for cardio, or I get bored, or I don't know. It just seems easier to lift weights.
Right. So let's talk about, like, all right, you're out of the hospital and your recovery went smooth. How long was it before you can start doing, back to your nonprofit, back to going, to exercise? And what was different after the transplant? What was the difference physically also?
So the first part of that question, I went home right away and I could do pretty much everything I wanted, except for lift more than 5 pounds. Physically was the most amazing feeling because I could go home and do whatever I wanted and not be tied to that oxygen tubing around my house. I didn't need oxygen anymore. And that felt amazing. Like, just to be able to breathe and to not have to worry about taking my little oxygen concentrator with me and make sure I had enough battery, and just the feeling of freedom, I guess you could say. There was a little bit of an issue with my sternum because they have to break your sternum for lungs. And so when it healed, it didn't heal properly. It was overlapping. And so for about a month after, I had a lot of pain in my chest. whenever I took a deep breath or like I coughed or laughed or whatever, I would feel this sharp pain. So I had to go back in a month later and get that fixed. And as soon as I did, everything was great. And after I got that sternum fixed, one of the biggest things that I remember and the most amazing feeling is before transplant, to sleep at night, I had to be propped up on pillows because I couldn't lay down because I couldn't breathe. And I would always watch TV, right? And I would see people in these movies or shows or whatever, and they just go plop down on the bed or lay down flat on the couch. And I would think, gosh, those people have no idea what they have whenever you can just lay down. And so when I got back from the hospital from that sternum surgery, I remember laying flat on my back, getting ready to go to sleep, and I didn't need but the one pillow. And it was the most emotional experience for me because I felt so good. I could lay there and breathe, and I could just be with one pillow, and that was the most amazing feeling. And so those things were great. My husband always says that it's not he didn't miss the oxygen, but he could always tell where I was when he got home because he would just follow the oxygen tubing, and now he couldn't find me when he got home from work. So it was a great feeling.
Right. Those small things that, people who don't have transplants take for granted. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
like for me, it was, over like Phil said, over a decade of not urinating, and just to urinate like a regular person was just great,
Yeah.
and people take that for granted, but that was emotional to me, when they took the catheter out and everything. I was
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, I feel like a normal person again. I mean, like
Yeah.
literally normal. And a lot of other people might think that was weird, but that was really emotional for me, and I was truly, truly thankful for that. So I get where
Yeah.
you're going from with that.
Yeah. Yeah, those little things are what makes it amazing.
Hmm.
So there's a story I'd like to share about that little thing. And so in Houston is right next to Galveston, which is right next to the Gulf. And if you go to Galveston and you park up on the street, it's just called the seawall, you have to kind of walk down a hill to get to the water. And so my husband and I would go there a lot. And I remember it was in July, around the 4th of July. My husband and I went there, and we were coming back up to the car, which you have to walk back up this big hill. And it took me so long to get up that hill because I had to keep taking breaks, and I was coughing, and my lungs were just killing me. By the time I got to the car, I just couldn't catch my breath. And that's the moment that I felt like, okay, maybe I really do need a transplant. And so go have my transplant. And then a couple months after the transplant, we went back to Galveston. And at that time, I was kind of wanting to get into photography. So I had all of my camera stuff and lawn chairs and this big heavy blanket that we could sit on, and went and took some pictures of the sunrise. And I told my husband on the way back to the car, I want to carry everything with me. I want to take everything up this hill. So we piled everything on. I was like a pack mule, and I walked up this hill, and I walked straight up there with everything. I got up to the car, and I just dropped everything on the ground, and I looked up into the sky, and I just thanked God because I just felt
Uh,
the most free I've ever felt. I was a little bit out of breath, but that's just because I had all this stuff, and it was the most amazing feeling that I ever had. Just being able to walk up that hill without that pain of trying to breathe. It was amazing.
yeah, that is amazing. I feel the emotions of, going through those small things where it's almost a feeling like overcoming yourself, like, hey,
Hmm.
I remember this moment where I could barely walk up here, and now I'm carrying all this stuff and conquering it. And it's conquering yourself. And it's a wonderful feeling with those moments that, no one else, and you don't care if anybody else gets it, but long as you get it and you understand where you're coming from and you feel the freedom of 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 being healthy. I'm telling you, it's a wonderful thing. Those things are amazing. Phil,
Yes.
yeah, go ahead, Phil. Are you any more questions?
So is what made you decide to start the Pre to Post Foundation transplant?
Well, so I wanted to start that. I first started my Pre to Post podcast, and I was really loving that. I was loving hearing all the stories of all these transplant recipients. And before my transplant, when I lived in Albuquerque, I had a foundation, a Christmas foundation, and I like to help people. And so when I got my transplant, I feel so blessed that I got this gift. And I always say, I want my donor to be up there in heaven looking down at me and being proud of me. And so I started the podcast so I could start spreading organ donation awareness, but I didn't feel like that was enough. I really feel like, I have this gift of my own. I'm able to go out and help people. It's something that I need to do for my donor. And so I wanted to start this foundation because I want to make sure that people have an opportunity to go through this experience and have things and resources and places that can help them get through it easier. So the foundation was created so that we can eventually be, the Pre to Post Transplant Foundation. I'm going to have a transplant. There's probably something that this foundation can help me and make this process easier. And so for me, helping people through something that I've been through is just something I feel like I have to do, and I want to do it, and I like doing it.
That's awesome right there. I love that, man.
Yeah.
Giving back is such a special thing. Let me ask you one question about the transplant. Is there any reason why they gave you a double lung opposed to a single lung transplant?
So if you have cystic fibrosis, you have to have double, because
Okay.
if you just take out one side, then you still have CF in the other side, and it's going to go over. It's going to just spread right over. So every
Okay.
CF patient has a double lung. Yeah, there's
I didn't
no
know.
option for the other.
See, I didn't know that. You learn something new every time.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Man, we
Appreciate
learn something new every time we do this show, Mr.
it. Okay. And I always got some kind of question I would ask that's going to bring it out, to bring out the information. But Jenny, like you said, though, the pre and post transplant nonprofit foundation is wonderful because somebody can go there and they can learn and they can empower themselves with the knowledge that that we kind of know from Giddy Up. I was 18
Yeah.
going through this when I first started, and Phil was even younger. So some of the things we know, so why not spread the wealth and give people the information? Because again, I'm 53 years old and I clearly didn't have the information when I first started, this
Yeah.
journey of transplant.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to say your story is prolific. I love that you stay healthy. I love, hats off to your mom. I would love to meet her because she's the one that
Absolutely.
kept you, right at the straight and narrow, and she wasn't letting her daughter fall through the cracks. So I just
Yes.
love when you see somebody take the bull by the horns and do what they have to do. And sometimes the parents can be a pain. Sometimes you be like, "Dang, mom," but mom was like, "Nope, I ain't taking no for an answer. This is what you got to do." And I have to hats off to her for doing that. I believe her doing what she did kept you for a
Yeah.
period of time, to be 39 years old with
100%. Yeah.
yeah. So if it wasn't for that, not saying you wouldn't be there, but who knows, you wouldn't be as healthy. And I believe she instilled the healthy consciousness in you, from day one, with probably exercise, nutrition, all
Mm-hmm.
those things. That's what I think I got, from playing, football and basketball at a young age and wanting to be in physical fitness and stuff like that. My dad was a track coach at the time. So, again, your story is really, really awesome. And thank you for joining us. I have no more questions and I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
One thing I will say before we get out of here is that you are definitely making your donor proud. I think all of us as transplant recipients, our objective is to show that if even if you go into rejection, it's not necessarily failure because who knows how your life would have been without that first transplant. Like when I
Right.
was younger, going through it, like I said, like Cook said, I was sick at 4 years old. And most of that time growing up, all I heard was kidney function, 30% kidney function. And in my mind, I kept just saying, if I don't get this transplant by the time I turn 18, I'm probably not going to make it.
Yeah.
And I had my transplant at 17. And, those 3 years of having my transplant were amazing. Still played college football, still did high school sports, after my transplant and everything like that. But it that years is what got me to this point because without that transplant, there's no telling if these 12 years of being on dialysis even happened.
Yeah.
So and that's why another reason why I work as hard as I do is so that my donor, whoever he or she was, is up there thinking like, oh, that just kind of just went to waste, So I'm taking every second, every minute that I have left on this earth, kind of dedicated to awareness for organ donation, just really just kind of helping people in general. Like y'all, I just like to help people. That's always
Yeah.
been who I was as a kid, as an adult. I just like helping people. That's just how I grew up. So yeah, I definitely would say you're definitely making your donor proud. Again, like Mr. Cook said, thank you again for
Thank
joining
you.
us. We definitely appreciate you and your time. Mr. Cook, you got any last words?
I do not, man. It was like I said, it was a wonderful podcast, a wonderful interview for sure.
Well, thank
Jenny,
you guys for. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
if you had to talk to a pediatric patients that's dealing with cystic fibrosis or needs a double lung transplant or just a transplant in general, what do you tell them to keep them encouraged in the fight?
I would say one to with I would say go out and live life like you didn't have the disease, but make sure that you're taking care of yourself at the same time. Don't dwell on your disease and stay active. Jump around, go out, play sports if you can, and have lots of friends and tell all your friends about your disease so they can be supportive and help you. And find other people who are in your same situation and talk to them. And that'll get you through.
Definitely,
Awesome.
definitely. I will definitely piggyback on finding somebody in your age group that's battling what you're battling. Because as a kid, I knew nobody that had kidney disease or even
Yeah.
dealing with pre-transplant issues, post-transplant, or anything like that. So I didn't meet my first transplant recipient till the day of my transplant. So for
Yeah.
13 years, it felt like it was just me, dealing
Yeah.
with it. So I understand that 100%. So again, thank you, Jenny. We appreciate you and your time. Tomorrow, actually my mom's birthday. Happy birthday, mom. Love you. Um, and we'll have Lee Newton Rhodes, who is a 2024 presidential candidate, on our show tomorrow to ask him some questions with some leading issues in our country, along with transplant issues and things of that nature. That's tomorrow at 6 Eastern, three o'clock Pacific. And then Thursday we will have Jessica Cook on, who will be explaining kind of substitute foods for the holiday season. So a healthier way for you to eat during the holiday season. It's something that we all need to know. Especially with pre-transplant people, to make sure your numbers are in the right area that you need them to be on the transplant list and things of that nature. So, see you all tomorrow and Thursday. Y'all have a wonderful week. We'll see you.
Bye.